Carl Jung believed that anxiety is a flare signal from your unconscious mind, a warning that unresolved parts of yourself are at war beneath the surface. He called these internal splits, the tension between your true self and the self you've learned to present to the world. As Jung put it, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And the harder you try to fix or control that worry, the louder it gets. What if the key to quieting your anxious mind isn't about control at all, but about listening to the parts of yourself you've pushed away? This is where Jung's approach stands apart, and it's the reason why your efforts to fight worry might be making things worse. If this resonates with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because understanding your inner world is the first step toward true peace. And we're just getting started. Think about this. The more you try to force your hands into water, the bigger the ripples. You only magnify worry by pushing it away. Jung famously said, "What you resist persists," pointing to the futility of battling worry head-on. When you try to shut down anxious thoughts, you don't erase them, you make them stronger. Worry isn't just random noise. It's a message from the parts of yourself that you've ignored, a signal that something inside you wants to be heard. The act of fighting it only intensifies the internal divide. Let's look at why this happens. Jung saw worry as a symptom of inner conflict, a clash between your conscious self, or ego, and the hidden parts you've left in the dark. Maybe you want to show the world you're confident and in control, but beneath that, there's a side of you that feels exposed or unsure. These are the shadow parts, the fragments you'd rather not acknowledge. When your ego and your shadow are at odds, worry is the result. Jung put it simply, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The parts you suppress don't disappear. They take the wheel from behind the scenes. Take a familiar example. You have a big presentation coming up. Suddenly, a wave of self-doubt hits. What if you forget your lines? What if you freeze? These sudden self-doubts are autonomous complexes resurfacing without your awareness. Instinctively, you might tell yourself to stop being ridiculous or try to drown out the discomfort with distractions. Maybe you scroll through your phone or bury yourself in busy work. But the more you try to silence that voice, the louder it gets. You lie awake at night, replaying every possible mistake, feeling more anxious than before. Jung believed this cycle happens because the parts of you that feel insecure or afraid aren't enemies. They're neglected aspects of your own psyche. When you ignore them, they push back harder, demanding your attention. The more you resist, the more you feel trapped in a loop of anxiety. Society tells you to stay positive or just let things go, but this only deepens the split inside you. Worry isn't something to be conquered or dismissed. It's a guide, pointing you toward what needs to be integrated. So, what if, instead of fighting worry, you paused and listened? What would happen if you didn't distract yourself or try to rationalize your way out of discomfort, but simply acknowledged it? Jung's message isn't about erasing discomfort. He saw it as a signal, an invitation to understand the parts of yourself you've left behind. Every persistent worry is a part of you asking to be seen. The key isn't to eliminate worry, but to use it as a signal that there's something deeper to explore. By recognizing worry as a pointer to unresolved conflict, you can respond before it spirals out of control. This shift changes everything. It opens up the possibility of catching worry in its earliest moments before it takes over your mind. Most people don't realize just how quickly worry can build from a single thought. The process starts when the mind senses uncertainty, and the ego, always on alert for threats, rushes in to regain control. This is the pattern that sets off a spiral, but it's also the point where you can intervene. Catching worry before it spirals isn't about willpower or positive thinking. It's about recognizing what's happening in the moment and stepping back. This moment of stepping back is often called the transcendent function in Jung's work, creating a bridge between the ego and the unconscious. Think of the ego as your mind's security system. It's always working to protect your sense of safety, image, and comfort. But it's also quick to misinterpret situations as threats. Say you text a friend and don't get a reply. Instead of assuming they're busy, your ego jumps to, "Did I upset them? Am I being ignored?" The ego hates not knowing, so it invents worst-case scenarios to make sense of the uncertainty. Suddenly, a simple silence becomes proof of rejection. Left alone, these thoughts multiply. You start worrying about the friendship, then about your own worth, then about whether anyone actually likes you. The original worry has been buried under layers of fear and imagined outcomes. Jung said worry springs from ego-driven fear, not from the soul's truth. The ego's obsession with control and certainty is what fuels the spiral. The harder you try to control the situation, the more anxious you become. Jung's answer wasn't to fight this process, but to observe it. When a worrying thought pops up, pause. Notice what's happening without jumping in to fix or suppress it. Label the thought for what it is: fear, not fact. This small act of recognition creates space between you and the thought. You're not swept away by it. Instead, you stay on the shore and choose whether to follow its flow. This is how you break the cycle of worst-case thinking and start to separate the voice of the ego from the reality of your experience. By asking, "What is this thought trying to tell me?" you begin the work of integration, turning neglected parts into allies rather than enemies. Curiosity replaces judgment. Maybe your fear of rejection points to a deeper need for connection. Maybe your dread of failure reveals an old wound that's never healed. Jung taught that these signals are not obstacles, but invitations. They show you where your attention is needed most. The goal isn't to erase worry or banish uncomfortable thoughts. It's to catch them early, observe them without judgment, and listen for what they're really pointing to. When you do this, you take the power away from the ego's grip and return it to yourself. The spiral loses momentum because you're no longer feeding it with resistance or control. Observing your worries is the first step. But what happens when you stop trying to manage every outcome and start living with uncertainty? That's where a deeper kind of calm becomes possible. Choosing presence over control is the shift that most people never make. Jung believed the ego's craving for certainty is the root of anxiety. Chasing control only deepens our divide. You spend so much energy trying to anticipate every outcome and manage how others see you, convinced that if you just get it right, you'll finally feel safe. But the more you try to control, the more disconnected you become from what's actually happening right now. Think about the last time you left a conversation and immediately started replaying everything you said. Was that joke too much? Did I sound awkward? Did they seem annoyed? This spiral is the ego's attempt to protect you from rejection by overanalyzing every detail. Jung put it simply, "You don't see things as they are, you see them as you are." In those moments, you're not seeing reality. You're projecting your own fears onto the situation. The ego convinces you that perfection and approval are the only paths to security. But this just leads to more anxiety and self-doubt. Jung saw this obsession with control, especially over how others perceive us, as a distraction from what matters most. The ego focuses on image, survival, and staying one step ahead of imagined threats. But your soul, the deeper self, only wants wholeness and presence. The more you chase external validation, the further you move from your authentic self. You end up living in your head, missing the reality of the moment in front of you. Here's the key. Instead of fixing, rehearsing, or micromanaging your image, practice showing up as you are. In Jungian terms, this is honoring yourself over the ego's survival strategies, a step toward wholeness. If you catch yourself spiraling about what someone thinks, pause. Remind yourself that you don't have to control their opinion. What matters is whether you're aligned with your true self. It's an act of courage to be genuine, especially when it feels risky. But every time you choose authenticity over image management, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. Letting go of control is not about ignoring uncertainty or pretending you don't care. It's about accepting that life is unpredictable and trusting yourself to handle whatever comes. Jung described the process of letting go as a confrontation with the unconscious. He warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's not just a philosophical idea, it's a practical challenge. If you let the ego run unchecked, you end up feeling powerless, as if life is happening to you. But when you stop clinging to control, you start to see where your real power lies. Choosing presence means bringing your attention back to what's real, right now, instead of chasing after imagined threats or perfect outcomes. It's deciding to trust the moment, even when it feels uncertain. When you do this, worry starts to lose its grip. Anxiety feeds on what-ifs and hypotheticals. Presence grounds you in what is. The next time you feel the urge to manage, fix, or overthink, ask yourself, what part of me is really in charge here? The ego or my true self? The more you practice this, the more you'll notice a shift. You stop living for approval and start living from a place of alignment. This isn't easy, but it's the path to genuine peace. And it's the foundation for what comes next. Understanding that real peace isn't about controlling life, but about accepting yourself fully, just as Jung taught. Worry, doubt, and fear aren't flaws to erase. They're signals from within, asking for your attention. Instead of shutting them down, pause and ask, what part of me is speaking right now? This simple act of listening closes the gap between who you are and who you think you should be. Integration starts with self-awareness, not self-judgment. If this resonates, share in the comments one worry you'll listen to differently today. Remember Jung's promise. When you stop fighting and start listening, worry becomes your guide, not your prison. True freedom isn't the absence of uncertainty, but the courage to trust yourself in every moment of not knowing.